Guys, people from all over the world who love shelling see our Sanibel Island as the shelling capital of the U.S. Now, that doesn't mean that every day is a shelling home run, but it does mean on Sanibel, if you know what you're doing, you can hit a shelling jackpot. And here's some tips on how to do it. This is Julie Oberlin.
Yeah, I love shelling. When I was younger, my uncle had a house in Fort Myers. First exposure to Sanibel, like, oh my word, I couldn't believe how cool it was, you just picking these things up.
There are a number of reasons that make Sanibel such a treasure trove for seashells. The main reason is because Sanibel is a barrier island, meaning that it runs east to west rather than north to south. So it has 15 miles of beach facing due south, which literally becomes a perfect shelf for currents to deposit shells onto the beaches.
I'm the weirdo that gets everybody in the family up at 2 in the morning because it's low tide and we had a storm the night before.
Right, that's tip number 1, storms. Storms kick up the wind and the currents, which in turn kick up the ocean floor. Can be any kind of storm, but the bigger the storm, the more the ocean floor gets disturbed.
It's cyclical by species. You know, one year you'll see nothing but sand dollars, you know, just tons and tons of sand dollars along with little other various shells. The next year it'll be horse conchs. The next year it'll be sea urchins.
Tip number 2, low tide. Low tide simply exposes more beach. Water from the high tide leaves and uncovers what it's left behind.
It's the thrill of the hunt and finding that certain one.
Tip number 3, wintertime. You see, in wintertime, winds typically come from the northwest, which go over the island, push the water south, which then creates a northwest current, which in turn kicks more shells up onto the due south facing beaches.
And what I do with them, I mean, honestly, I leave most of them. Sometimes I'll strategically put them where a little kid, I'll see somebody come down the street and they'll see it and they'll pick it up.
Our day of shelling was good conditions, but not as good as it gets. So I called my friend Sharmon Simonetti, who runs Southwest Florida Beachlife, basically social media about shelling in Southwest Florida. I asked her if she'd ever captured a killer day on Sanibel. She said, yep, and she sent me this footage from one time on Sanibel right after a storm. Tip number 4, find a beach less traveled. Sharmon likes to shell between Bowman's Beach and Blind Pass because, as you can see, there's no public access paths to the beach between these 2 points. So those beaches are less traveled.
They don't groom the beaches. It's not that kind of place. It's natural. It's not meant to be perfect. We're all about conservation, not leaving anything.
My first time shelling on Sanibel was at my good buddy Johnny's house. And when I went there was this pile of shells. It was like a foot high and maybe 6 feet wide and just went all the way down the beach as far as the eye could see. I later learned this is called the rack line. It happens when the high tide has pushed the shells up into a pile, but the low tide didn't take it back out into the water. I was amazed, and that's exactly what we're looking at here in Sharmon's footage.
If there's a wedding on the beach, you better not leave a rose petal. They don't have to clean the beaches because nobody leaves things behind.
There are over 250 known species of shells you can find on Sanibel. In my opinion, not only is Sanibel one of the most beautiful islands in the world, but when you realize that you're basically standing on an island made of these seashells, it gets even more beautiful.
It's the thrill of the hunt of this. It's looking for that absolute, perfect little specimen. It's like little gems. I mean, it's wonderful. The more respect that there is to the environment, the better the island even stays.
So then Kimberly finally showed up, and we went out on the beach.